The U.S. aided the rise of its enemy. Now the Kremlin and Iran are operating in the strategic space that the PRC provides them. That space and Beijing's aggression will only increase if the U.S. does not act to end its threat deflation, break the chokehold of the engagement school on the U.S. foreign policy establishment, and defeat the CCP by evicting it from its power. Evicting it from power. So this, I thought this was a great article. It's kind of short, sweet, and to the point. But it, everything rings true. Opening up China economically, with that Henry Kissinger and the Nixon administration did, was a disaster, and this is something that sometimes we do. Hindsight is 20/20, right? But I think that we should have seen. I think a lot of people always underestimated China. I think that a lot of leaders in the West thought that they were backwards and that they had no chance, because when, Mao did his great leap forward, they were making inferior steel in like little furnaces that farmers built, on their own land. And people laughed about it. Like, Chinese products are inferior. Their steel sucks, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, I don't know how we can get away with saying that today. Obviously, yes, a lot of Chinese products are inferior to American products, but they also have most of the factories that are building the products that are designed by American corporations. So they have the industrial infrastructure to create good products because they're using the schematics that the West has given them, because of requirements of U.S. companies doing business there to give up some of their trade secrets and things like that. Computers are made in China. Game consoles are made in China. A lot of microchips that are basic are made in China. There are some chips that the Chinese make themselves that are almost as good as some of the things that Qualcomm and Apple are making in their, like Oppo and OnePlus phones. So I think we underestimate China to our own detriment. They're also one of only two other countries that has launched their own space station by themselves. They have a space station. They have their own space program that's pretty proficient and advancing at any moment. They're upgrading and growing the size of their ICBM arsenal. And they've tailored their military specifically to fight against the United States and our allies. Whereas we've tweaked our military to fight insurgencies in the Middle East. And we wasted 20 years there re-gearing our military for desert combat against asymmetric forces that we allowed our peer state adversaries to catch up to us, and in some cases dictate the tactics of the future with drone warfare and cyber warfare. So am I confident that the U.S. could defeat any one of these adversaries? Sure. I think that we could defeat China. But again, China, we got to bring up the map here, because I love bringing up the map. So let's show how this is. And I'm sure I've done this before with the island chains, but I think it's pretty important. It's a little bit easier to see. So we have our island chains here. We kind of have China isolated. China is very reliant. Now they've been increasing their reliance on coal and other things for strategic purposes, obviously. So really China needs oil for their military. They have been switching to electrical cars and coal power plants for their domestic power production and building nuclear power plants as well. And part of that is not because they care about the environment. Obviously, building coal plants isn't, but because they don't want oil to be used by the civilian population in case they go to war with the United States. So that's a pragmatic reason for them and a logical reason for them to disincentivize fossil fuel vehicles, but they're still using fossil fuels to power them. So China obviously doesn't have its own oil. There really isn't too much oil here. We do suspect that in the Spratly Islands, which are located here in the South China Sea, that there's a massive oil deposit there. And that is why China has been trying to claim the entire South China Sea. If you see some photos, you'll see what's called the 9-dash line, which extends China's territorial borders to all of the South China Sea, even though that's patently absurd because you have Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia and Malaysia all here, and clearly they would have claims to at least some of this territory, or China wouldn't. And China uses their fishing fleets to intimidate other countries, and basically as an extension of the People's Republic Army Navy, the PLAN, to terrorize and berate other nations and steal their natural resources like fish. So, and they've built artificial islands in this area that have essentially become unsinkable aircraft carriers and, strategic bases with which they can launch cruise and ballistic missiles at the U.S. Navy. So we're building new military bases and reactivating bases in the Philippines. Philippines is going to be a massive strategic ally when it comes to this. Obviously, Japan has upped their military budget to the point where they may be the third biggest spender in the entire world after the U.S. and China very soon. But a lot of this is going to take years. Australia is buying nuclear submarines. It's going to take them years to get them. Like, Australia is not going to be able to do very much for us for at least 20 years. And I don't think we have that much time. I think China is seeing the writing on the wall. The U.S. is about as weak as we're going to get while, not having physical assets in the area or having stronger allies. So right now, it would basically be us against China one-on-one, and we would be fighting in their territory, which, even though we've got these bases here, our allies aren't that powerful at this moment. Submarine warfare is going to be a huge part of that. Part of the problem, though, with submarine warfare is that the South China Sea is notoriously shallow. So submarines will be operating in a space where there's a lot of noise, and they may not be able to keep themselves as stealthy as they would normally be. Now, the linchpin to the first island chain defense, the second island chain defense goes further out to like Guam and all this stuff. So we'd go, further here, and then even Hawaii would be kind of a last line of defense. But if we're in Hawaii, like we're done. We've lost Southeast Asia at this point. Is here, which is the Strait of Malacca. So the reason why it is a big deal right now with everything that is going on is that obviously China gets most of its oil from the Middle East, like a lot of people do. So you've got oil coming out of the Persian Gulf. It flows through here and goes through the Strait of Malacca and into China. All the U.S. Navy needs to do is block the Strait of Malacca, which right here we can see using the legend. You guys can't see it there. Is only about, it's like 20 miles, 20 or 30 miles. So if you have a carrier battle group here, or you've got submarine blockade, like that's it. You can prevent the Chinese merchant fleet and oil fleet from being able to resupply China. So this is a serious problem for them. This is why they need to take the South China Sea and the natural resources there, why they need Russia as an ally to buy oil from them, and why they need to break through Taiwan, break through the first island chain, and be able to go around and out into the Pacific. And then eventually threaten Australia as well, because right now they have to go around Australia and all that stuff, and they don't have to deal with that. So this is why it is so critical to hold the line here and to empower our allies against China. Because again, we're also going to be fighting on their territory. Like a few of these islands right here near Quanzhou, I believe that's how you pronounce it. Some of these are owned by Taiwan, believe it or not. And they're like right off the coast of China. So, the first sign that you're going to see something is, will China pull what Russia did in 2014 with Crimea, where, they took back the fleet, the Black Sea Fleet headquarters, and they took Crimea from Ukraine, and the West did nothing about it, but say, Putin's bad, you shouldn't have done that, and that's it. Same thing with Georgia, when they took portions of Georgia during the Bush administration.